Today we'll make a custom barrel head stencil. So this is a barrel head stencil. What it does is it goes on top of the barrel like this, and the customer uses either spray paint or a propane torch to sort of brand this onto the barrel head. Now the material used for this here is stainless steel 304, although we can use 316 or literally any other material you could imagine. And the thickness is 1/8. The closest gauge to that would be 11 gauge. So we get the focus working. Not today. Anyways, so when it comes to doing something like this here, we have a lot of different tools that we can use to make it. In this case here, we use the Waterjet. And the reason why we use the Waterjet is because we have very fine, small details like this here that you want to maybe detail up to like 1/16 or 1/32. And you can't really do that really well with the plasma cutter because the plasma cutter, the way it moves and the way it operates, it just can't do very fine details like that. So that's why the Waterjet was used for the cutting of this. Now something to keep in mind with Waterjet is that it is a dirty process, and this is used for a stencil anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But what it does is it shoots water with garnet. Garnet is basically sand. So it shoots down and it abrades all the way through the material. So it's not like a cutting, it's more like a wearing out of the material. And it's really important that after all of this is done here, that on the back, we actually sand up the back, because what you end up having is a lot of little knives sticking out that you have to sort of, if you're holding with your hands, you'll chop up your hands with it. Waterjet cutting is a fun process, but it's a very wet process. What you'll see randomly are shots of, as you can see, jets of water shooting up. And what that is the piercing stage. So what's happening is the sand and the water are mixing together to create your abrasive stream. And before it goes all the way through the material, it has to wear out the material all the way down. And during that process, that's when you see that huge, shot of water shooting up. Now, just because of that, you can tell that it's a very wet process to begin with. Not only is the material wet, but everything around it is also wet. And that's just the way it is. The reason why you use a Waterjet over, let's say, plasma here in the shop is because when it comes to Waterjet, you can do a lot more finer details that you can't really do using a plasma. The reason for that is the plasma has maybe a diameter of maybe 1/16. Maybe a little bit more than that depending on the material spec. And when it comes to Waterjet, well, it's a lot smaller, a lot finer. So although you still have roughly a round sort of diameter being cut out, the diameter is so small that it still looks kind of sharp to you. Now the reason why we use this instead of, let's say, a router, is because a router would actually do the carving in here, but you'd be limited by the bit size. You can't really get a 1/32 inch bit that will last anywhere near enough to cut this kind of material. This is stainless steel. The nice thing about stainless steel when we do these custom stencils is that you don't have that flash rusting that you get with mild steel. Mild steel is a really wonderful material. It's very cost effective. And it's great for stencils because you're going to spray paint and it'll come off and you're fine with it, making sure it's nice and clean. But with these, when the stencil is made out of stainless steel, then you don't have to worry about any pieces of rust coming off onto the barrel. As you can see here, the Waterjet's just cutting all the way through, every little bit. And again, you see water shooting out all around it too, not just shooting straight up while it's doing the piercing. The reason for that is because you're not seeing most of the Waterjet or the jet of water being produced by the Waterjet. Most of it is underneath the plate, and what it's doing is coming down into the vat of water and then shooting back up all the way around. So it's not only a wet process, it's a very dirty process. And when you see it all around you is actually that garnet or sand building up on the surface of it. And when the water comes back up, it's pushing a little bit further away. So that's why you see, like, I can tell you this is stainless steel, but you wouldn't be able to tell, really, because of all the stuff that's settling on the surface of it. Now, like the plasma and other tools we have here in the shop, the problem with cutting some very small details is sometimes those little pieces come back up. So that's why you see an arm coming in there and grabbing some of the little pieces that are shooting up. Because what can happen is they can come into contact with the head of the Waterjet, and best case scenario, nothing really happens. Worst case scenario, it actually drags the whole sheet over, and then as soon as that happens, you're completely out of spec, so you have to recut the whole thing out. There are a couple of ways to avoid those kind of things. What I use a lot here in the shop to do that, doesn't matter what machine it is actually to go ahead and make those bigger parts into smaller parts. So let's say you have like a T. Instead of cutting a T as a T, you cut a T into 3 or 4 parts across so that nothing can stick up because the pieces are so small they just go right down into the table. Once all the inside parts are done, the next step is obviously to cut it out. That's what's happening here. After that, everything's nice and clean and it's ready to actually ship to the customer after I go ahead and sand the back of it. Well, the reason why I sand the back of it is because of all the dross underneath that can get really sharp, so it just needs to be cleaned up. So when it comes to custom barrel head stencils, we can literally make them out of any size, any shape, any material, any design profile. Now, a couple of things you want to keep in mind, especially for stencils, regardless of the material, is you'll notice, let's say here for the comb, there's a little bit of a space here. That's important because you need to have support material. When you have support material, it means that the inside cannot fall out. Generally what I tell customers is you want roughly 1/8 of material, so 1/8 inch or 3 millimeters. And that gives you tons of strength for it, especially for something like this. This is actually quite heavy, surprisingly heavy. It's probably about at least 10 pounds, I'd say. And when you have small little details like this here, for instance, this would not be possible with the plasma cutter. So again, it's just small little details that you sort of dictate which machine we use for what process. Another thing to keep in mind with stencils is we need to know ahead of time what you're going to be using it with. So if you're just using spray paint, we make a lot of custom polycarbonate stencils, which is bulletproof glass. The good thing about bulletproof glass is, yes, you can see it on the initial spray paint, but it weighs nothing and you can roll it up. Well, for stainless steel, you're definitely not rolling it up. But if you're using a propane torch, you don't want to use plastic because it'll just burn up on top of your barrel head. So just small little things to keep in mind when you contact us to make custom barrel head stencils for you. So how do you go about making one? Send us the design file. We'll review it, we'll run a couple of simulations on it, and then we'll do it for you and we'll ship it right to your door.